Recording on. This is Martin Giles of the Guildford Dragon News, and this morning I'm with two MPs whose constituencies overlap the Guildford Borough Council area. Now I've got Angela Richardson, who's the MP for Guildford, and Sir Paul Beresford, who's the MP for Mole Valley. Welcome to you both to the Guildford Dragon.
Good morning, Martin.
Good morning.
Now, you've both admitted implicitly or directly that the local plan played a part in the Surrey County Council Guildford Division election. How many county council seats in Guildford do you think it cost your party? All four? Angela?
I think it would be fair to say that so I think to explain this, Guildford Borough Council has 4 members of Parliament, so it really does overlap. It goes all the way up to Jonathan Lord's patch, it goes into Ash, which is Michael Gove's patch, and then obviously the Horsleys and Clarendon is in Sir Paul Beresford's patch. So I lost 2 seats in the Guildford Borough Council area. The one in South East Surrey, I think perhaps less of a local plan issue, but you know, the residents group did, you know, mobilise and perhaps spoke more to the heart of the town centre and some of the things that people wanted to see there. But definitely in Guildford East, where Philip Brooker was standing and the incumbent before him was Graham Elwood, I do think that the local plan played a part there. And obviously the results were quite close. There was still a lot of Conservative voters and Conservative support there. But, you know, I was meeting with the Burpham Community Association last night and talking about the local plan and lack of infrastructure in Gosden Hill. And, you know, so the local plan is a big issue for residents.
Okay, thank you. So Paul, what about in the east of the borough of Guildford? It is definitely an issue there, isn't it?
It's definitely an issue. It's always been an issue with me and with all the Conservative candidates there. It's to get people to recognise that though they are Conservative candidates, we have always been opposed to the local plan or aspects of the local plan. And we want a review. They lost Julie Isles, or we lost Julie Isles, but to put it bluntly, they lost Julie Isles. She is a strong, able executive member of Surrey County Council, and she is a great loss to the Horsleys.
I mean, she paid the price for the local plan, really, didn't she? Because most people agree with you that she was a good councillor.
Yes, she's an absolutely excellent councillor, and the local people failed to grip with the fact that I and the candidates for the Mole Valley section of Guildford at all of the elections have been absolutely adamantly opposed to the extension into the Greenbelt in our particular wards.
But who else were they to blame other than the Conservative Party?
Well, the point that has to be made is that if you want to get it changed, you have to be in with the big guns, and the big guns around here in Surrey are the Conservatives, and we will make the difference. That's Angela and I will be fighting and have been to try and get the numbers down, and now the new ONS reports come out on towns like Guildford, we will be fighting to get the numbers down, but it's
Okay.
more than that.
Okay, well, we'll probably come on to that a bit later. Now, Angela, at the election count, you said that we should await to see what was in the Queen's speech on planning, but it's just more bad news for those who value the green belt and green spaces in Guildford, isn't it?
So I think one of the things I want to sort of, I don't want to teach anybody to suck eggs. Planning's really complicated. A lot of people don't understand it. It's very obscure, but what we do understand is how it makes people feel. And I think that's the most important thing about planning. The white paper was launched in August last year. At the same time, a consultation was launched by government. The consultation had 40,000 responses in. I spoke to Robert Jenrick's special advisor last night and asked him, have they actually reported on that consultation yet? And he said, no, we've got a couple of months yet to wait for that consultation to be reported on. And this bill is not going to be coming before the House for quite some period of time. It's in the session of Parliament, you know, and each session of Parliament can be for as long as it needs to be in order to get the bills through. But, you know, there is a long period of time to be able to, for Sir Paul and I to be able to represent constituents' concerns to government to make sure we can get changes in the same way that those the Conservative colleagues in the Southeast were able to get the government to concede on the housing algorithm. So the things that people are concerned about, this is all headline stuff, but none of it is new. The white paper stands as it was produced last year. That is what is going to be the basis of the actual bill that we see the legislation coming through. And, you know, it's up to us to make sure that any aspects that don't work for our local areas are well represented to government. There are some very, very good things in that white paper.
Okay.
One of the things.
Let me move on to Sir Paul, though. Sir Paul, do you support the proposals that we know about so far with this white paper? Because isn't the motivation behind it to actually speed up the planning process and really short circuit the objections they get through the councils?
Yes, but with safeguards. There are, in very, very, very simple terms, using zoning, you have areas that are for building, and that will speed up the building. Those that are for renovation and repair and so forth, particularly for city areas and inner city areas, that will speed up. And then there are areas for which there will be no building, and that will include the Greenbelt. And it is down for the local authorities to decide how that zoning applies to their local authority area. So there is the protection there, and there is the protection there for the Greenbelt if the local authorities use it. And that's what really worries me.
Well,
I want Guildford to wake up and review their local plan and bring some of the stuff that the land that they took out of the Greenbelt back into the Greenbelt.
But are you saying then that this categorization can only take place if they review the plan?
No, we'll have to see what the legislation actually says, as Angela was saying, but the white paper says that the local authorities will zone their area, those 3 zones. And one of those zones is very protective, specifically for the Greenbelt.
And they'll be able to zone that at their own behest, or will it have to be approved?
I think it may have to be approved because you don't want Neanderthals to will totally block any building.
No, but if they just wanted to zone all the Greenbelt, is that going to be permissible, do you imagine?
Well, as in the white paper, they mention that specifically under the area in which they can zone out for building.
Okay. Now, do you think your party is forgetting its heartland support in the south as it chases its new one territory in the north? Because it has been said that, you know, that's what's occurring. The Labour Party seem to be forgetting their heartland in the north, and the Conservatives are leaving not everybody, but a significant number of their voters feeling betrayed in the south. Do you think, is that something your party is worrying about? Paul, we'll start with you this time.
No, I don't think your accusation is right. That they are, and we had it at the general election, we were very carefully watching what was happening and putting our strength into the areas where we had a heavy fight. We are fighting the Liberals in these 2 wards, but the 2 constituencies particularly, and they fight a different sort of fight, but we've managed to push them back. They didn't take Guildford. Angela won Guildford. They didn't take Mole Valley. In fact, every single seat in Surrey is Conservative, and I think that will remain.
Okay, and are you worried about that, Angela?
So I think this sort of north-south divide is quite a simplistic narrative. The levelling up agenda isn't just for the north and the Midlands, it's for right across the country, including down into the southwest, where, you know, they have a lot of poverty, and the average wage down in Cornwall is £10,000 lower than it is in the rest of the country. You know, in the north of Guildford, I've got pockets of deprivation which need levelling up. I was pleased to be able to get some funding for Mareswood College in order to improve the fabric of their buildings. You know, we had £50 million come in for the Wayside Urban Development project before I was elected, and since then I was able to secure £25 million Public Works Loan Board, that if the council chooses to take that up, you know, that would be really helpful to them, to be able to, you know, secure extra financing, because I understand that project, the financing is quite difficult. So no, I do think that the government understands the fight that we've got in seats like this, and that, you know, that in the southeast, you know, I would, you know, encourage readers to look at the article that was published in Conservative Home that I wrote this morning in reflection on the elections, because I talk about the fact that, you know, everything is contrasted between people who will want to live somewhere and people who will live anywhere. And down in the southeast, we're often accused of being people who don't really care about where we live. We don't have a sense of place. That couldn't be, you know, further from the truth. People really care about their communities here, and it's our job as local MPs to understand what people want, and then try and make sure that we get that messaging up the line so that government understands.
So has the Prime Minister changed his mind? Does he still think Guildford is a price worth paying or not?
I've not spoken to the Prime Minister about that anytime recently. I think I just get on with my job and I speak to the ministers that I can you know, talk to about the issues that we need to sort out here. And planning is a big issue. And I have spoken with, you know, the Secretary of State and also the Housing Minister about the issues and concerns. And can I come back to one of the good things that I particularly raised that's in the white paper? My understanding is that there is going to be a levy on building on developers who do not build out their planning permissions. And that's one of the things that not just me, but my predecessor, Anne Milton, have been fighting for. She had a Westminster Hall debate in 2019 before I was elected. You know, so we have been pushing on behalf of.
Right, and I think others will support, I suspect others will support that too. I've mentioned to you before the site we've got at the bottom of Portsmouth Road, that it's being, my son is 28, he can't remember it being built up. So, I mean, it really is very poor when we've got people that need homes. Okay. Now, Angela, you supported the local plan in 2019. Do you still support it now? And do you support your party colleagues, such as Sir Paul, who calls for a review?
So absolutely, I do support calling for a review. If the evidence changes, you must change your mind. If you don't, then I think all is lost. And there are a couple of reasons why the current leadership of the council needs to put a review in place straight away. The first is what Sir Paul alluded to earlier with the ONS statistics. Now, I have spoken to the previous leader, Paul Spooner, yesterday. The overseas students, they did actually manage to get the numbers down in Guildford from what was predicted, because they challenged those figures in the same way that they were challenged by Andy Street in the West Midlands with Coventry. So, you know, the local council didn't just say, oh, we need to build this many houses, you know, this is what the ONS is saying. They did actually challenge those figures. So I do not think that the change will be as significant as some other people think it will be. However, the other thing that's important is that you've got to have the infrastructure with the local plan. We cannot afford to have 14,000 homes built without having the improvements to our major arterial road, the A3. So Paul can speak for the M25 interchange, but I speak for the A3 as it goes through Guildford. We have a lot of problems with traffic, and we will have more problems with traffic as we get more houses built, which is why I've called for the A3 to be tunnelled under Guildford.
Okay, thank you. Now, Sir Paul, do you agree with Angela's analysis there of the ONS figures? Because there are people that are saying, actually, there's a major discrepancy. And if what Angela says is correct, and I'm not questioning it, but if it is correct, then it means that actually a review is not going to bring the numbers down significantly. And why is the consideration wrong that we risk actually allowing a higher number?
The numbers that they came through on the very first decision on the local plan were higher than were actually required. I think that the ONS report and what Angela's saying is correct, that the figures actually will go down, and we're going to go for them to go down. I think they need to rethink and review the local plan, because there are areas where the figures could go up within Guildford and where they should go down, and particularly the Greenbelt. Within days of the last Guildford borough election, I wrote to the then Liberal leader of Guildford Council asking for them to commence the review. Every local plan under the current legislation must be reviewed every 5 years. That review can start at any time. And bearing in mind that the Villagers people and the Conservatives in Mole Valley candidates all stood on asking for the decision to be shifted and the Greenbelt properties and lands in the Mole Valley Inn to come back into the Greenbelt, I asked that that review started immediately. After some considerable time, I got a reply saying no, which was understandable because the Liberal leader, with many of her cohorts, supported that plan at the election.
Well, actually, there was only one, that she was the only Liberal to vote for the adoption.
Well, she was the leader and she has now gone. I wanted that review to start immediately. It could have got the numbers organized in the right direction, and it could have got the Greenbelt land back into the Greenbelt. They've not done that. The ONS question raises it, and the infrastructure questions raise this issue even more firmly, and therefore the review should start now, immediately, and with that in mind.
Okay, but do you think that the calculate, 1 minute please, Angela, do you think, Sir Paul, that the calculation in the original plan based on ONS data was wrong?
I think, no, not necessarily wrong. I think that the question has been raised on the ONS data, whether in fact the figures were right and should be looked at again. And I think they should be looked at again. But I wanted it raised because they were putting more properties on the market, in effect, more land than they actually required. And Angela struck on one of the problems, and that is the A3. If the Wisley building goes ahead, and it looks to me as though it's going to, because if there was any reversal, there would probably be a court case, a judicial review, and I think it would be very hard to support that change. If that goes through, we've got between about 2,500 more properties there. They will have to come onto the A3, and you can assume, because it's isolated, because the transport structure for that particular area is low, that each particular house will probably have one car per house, if not 2 or 3. That is going to put a heavy load on the A3. It's going to put a heavy load on Junction 10, and it's also going to affect Wisley RHS. So the fact that there's a delay for Junction 10, I see as a positive, because we've got to get stuck in there and take into account these changes and take into the account the action that we wish to put in side roads, links on the roundabout south of Junction 10 to ease the problems. But Angela's right, that 50-mile-an-hour roadway up through Guildford is an absolute abomination of a bottleneck, and it will not take the load, it isn't even taken now, the load of traffic that's going to land on that particular section of the A3. I wish her luck for boring a hole underneath Guildford. I think it's an excellent idea, but where is the money coming from? So therefore, one has to recognize it's probably not coming. So cut down the numbers of properties that are in the plan.
Okay, Angela, you wanted to say something?
Yes. The other reason the local plan needs to be reviewed is because I have it on good authority that because of the master plan that's being brought forward by the current administration, they're going to double the number of houses in the town centre, you know, from 3,000 to 6,000. You know, if they're going to do that,
You support that, presumably, do you?
I support the idea of trying to build next to infrastructure, not going up too high in Guildford, because I think that would be really wrong for the character of the town. But why do that and not review the local plan so that you can take some of the countryside sites out? It doesn't make sense to me. You're adding insult onto injury.
Okay, but why, you could say, why wasn't that done in the first plan?
We did.
Some people did.
I did. Angela wasn't.
Yeah.
Angela wasn't.
No.
I was there.
Okay.
I did, and you know I did.
Okay. Now, do you think that you can ever regain the complete trust of voters in Surrey when your party on planning, when your party continues to accept donations from developers? Angela.
I think it's a complicated relationship. It's not something that I'm involved in at all. I'm probably one of the least connected people in the Conservative Party. And, you know, I will be
But
speaking...
Robert Jenrick is, isn't he? I mean, we know the story about that.
Well, I think it was quite clear that he had no idea that this person was going to be sat next to him. And he put everything that he was asked to out in the public domain. And I actually spoke on that Opposition Day debate and talked about how important openness and transparency was. I've asked to speak on Tuesday in the Queen's Speech debate, which is scheduled to discuss planning. And one of the things that I'm very concerned about is news that I have had that property developers are buying up large tracts of area of great landscape value in my constituency and in neighbouring constituencies because they believe that legislation will come forward to make it easier for them to build on that. One of the things that I will be working on is trying to get the Surrey Hills AONB review done at speed. By Natural England and DEFRA, and I'm working with other colleagues in Surrey to do that, so that we can strengthen protections for areas of great landscape value, areas of outstanding natural beauty. I'm not necessarily on the side of developers. I do want to see good quality development happening. Beautiful design as part of the white paper, that's really important. I think one of the disappointing things sometimes is that if you push developers too hard, you don't get the best development for your area.
Okay, thank you. But if you were in charge, would you continue to accept donations from developers?
I think, I'm afraid all political parties receive donations. That is just the nature of the business. As long as those donations are properly recorded and they're transparent, and everybody declares things properly on their register of interests, that's how the system works.
Your party wouldn't accept donations just from anybody, would they?
I'm afraid
No,
I'm not.
No, we wouldn't accept it from just anybody. And I can think of a few very dubious organizations, particularly those with links to China and Russia, where we would not accept the link. But equally, if you turn it on its head, if you're looking at the funding of the Labour Party, the funding of the Labour Party is mainly from unions.
Yeah.
When you come to any legislation relates to that, how would you trust the Labour Party on it?
Yeah, but two wrongs don't make a right, Paul, do they?
No, but transparency makes it clear.
Right, but even so, why are these people giving donations? I mean, we know why the trade unions give donations to the Labour Party. They want to exert influence. That's exactly the same with the developers, isn't it?
Well, what they've got, if you want the influence, is that they know that we are a party that wants some transparency and we want houses to be built, hence the new plan. And if you are a developer and you're looking for land and looking to build, and the land that you're looking at is in the zone for development, you've got the clarity, and you can also go along to the local authority and move it. To give you another positive example, and I hope you'll see it as positive, the new legislation intends that public land that is not being used, the developer can go along and say to the owner, the public owner of the land, I want to use that, and the public owner of the land has 1 month to come back and say yes or no. If it's no, to explain it. This gives an upper hand to actually getting development happening, and we need it. Like it or lump it, people want houses. And
Yeah,
when
and
I look at some,
I suspect a lot of people will welcome that, because as I've said to Angela, we've got sites here in Guildford, which I'm sure you're aware of as well, Sir Paul, and that would be, a lot of people would regard that as a welcome move. Isn't another thing that could be done is some kind of penalty taxation on owners that leave their properties empty?
I think I meant,
no,
sorry.
go
Go
on,
on.
Angela.
No, Paul, you go.
There are different reasons for that. There are people that move out and move backwards. And, I've got quite a number of constituents that work elsewhere. They leave their homes empty because they cannot get the tenants out if they come back to, or when they come back. It's just not quite clear. If they were just abandoning them and leaving them to fall apart, that's different. But there are things that the local authorities can do already on that.
But I'm really thinking of owners that own, you know, considerable numbers of properties and they're left open, are left empty.
Well, the local authority can put pressure on them, and at the end of the day, there's compulsory purchase available.
Okay, now that brings me on to my next question. Really, is you've stripped so many powers away from local authorities now. Aren't all they're left with is the task of managing central government policy? That they don't really have the authority to refuse things, and the new proposals are going to take even more power away from them. Angela.
So it's really interesting. We were talking about these designations and, you know, zoning for growth or zoning to protect, as Paul wants to do with the green belt space. I think on the flip side of zoning for growth, where it does, you know, the accusation is that there is no representation at local level. Things like the £15 million for the Ash Bridge project, which is a neighbouring constituency that Michael Gove has, that came as a result of the fact that we are effectively zoned for growth. You know, the investment into the Wayside Urban Village project, it's because we're zoned for growth. We are growing. We need to keep growing. What is the opposite of growth? It's stagnation. It's one of my biggest fears for Guildford, that as we see the towers going up in Woking and we see new business come into Woking, a lot of people compare Guildford with Woking. Now, I don't want the type of development that Woking's got, but I also don't want people to suddenly start shopping in Woking and not shopping in Guildford. Guildford has got so much to offer. We have a huge, I think, in terms of green belt development, the Surrey Sports Park and the Surrey Research Park have to be examples of where green belt land has been turned into something that has given Guildford the edge and attracts a lot of inward investment from the outside. We have to balance these conversations, but at the same time, we have to make sure that that the local people don't feel like they're being landed with a whole load of housing and they're not getting any infrastructure with it. So I you know, whilst
that is how they feel, Angela. That is how some of them feel.
So what local councillors can do and what they should have been doing, and in the Waverley part of my constituency in Cranley, where we had a lot of development on greenfield sites, they didn't fight for the infrastructure to go along with it. You know, that is something that local councillors can do, is make sure they keep challenging what the officers are doing at council and making sure that their communities get the infrastructure. You know, that is something local councillors can do.
Okay, so Paul, does growth mean necessarily population growth, or is it just GDP growth?
It's a little bit of both, and the demand from local people for housing for their children, etc., will mean population growth. I know that from my own children.
Sorry, I don't understand that. Why is it necessary for the population in Guildford to grow?
Because of the demand. There is a demand, and we're questioning the demand. And the demand, a lot of it is coming from local people. I'm one example. I have 3 children. They're living in Surrey. They're married. They've got children. They will all look for housing.
But the birth rate in Surrey is the birth rate of those people in Surrey isn't high.
No, it's not high, but it's still growing.
Okay.
Can I come back to one of the things that you were talking about with local authorities not having the power? when I was in the local authority and planning, the real difficulty we had was to stop development that was hideous. And the new local plan arrangements, or the new white paper arrangements, talks about beauty, etc. And that's where they had the influence. So that if you're going to build a hideous block, perhaps over Guildford Railway Station, the local authority will have greater powers to actually say, yes, you can build there, but it's got to look better than it is.
But that development is going to happen under a Tory government and a Tory local, the approval was made under a Tory local council. It's going to stand as a monument to Conservative planning policy, isn't it?
No, it's going to stand as a monument to the Conservative group at that time. But they didn't have quite the same powers as they will have under the direction that's going to come through when the legislation comes through, to come along and say, that looks as though it's been built by Stalin. I want it built by modern day beautiful methods.
Well, I think if Paul Spooner was here, he would say that he didn't have a sufficient power to stop that.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
He will have.
He will have. Okay. Or yeah, whoever. Okay. So I just want to move on quickly before we finish onto something positive, which is the vaccination rollout, which I think everyone agrees has gone well here in Surrey and across the country. Are you worried about this new variant that's being reported? And what is your message to our residents about it? Angela, if I can start with you, please.
So it's definitely a variant of concern. We've had reports coming out that the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary are very concerned about it, but they will look at putting in measures in place there. They will try and increase the rollout of vaccinations there. And, you know, we've got surge testing capacity. We've got a huge capacity in our testing. And that's one of the good things that has been built up and will continue to be used. I think if my message to local residents is Monday is really exciting. You know, we're just in another step of the lockdown. At the moment, there is no noises coming out to say that that's going to be stopped at all. There's also noises coming out saying further freedoms being lifted on the 21st of June will still go ahead. But I do think that the message to be cautious is still a good one. But we do need to start living our lives with more freedom. I know that people here in Surrey are looking forward to more freedoms.
Okay.
And, you know, it's really important that we get the balance right.
So, Paul, should we, if necessary, slow down the rate of second vaccination so that the areas most at risk can speed up theirs?
No, the second vaccination makes quite a difference. But I think the difference in this country than probably anywhere, with the possible exception of the States, is that we've had the gumption to put an awful lot of money into research. It doesn't always come with the goods, but part of that research is finding new vaccinations and to get hold of variants of this particular virus, variants for flu, etc., etc. The difference with this government is that they have actually put much more money in, and not only have they done that, they've backed the companies once they've got the vaccinations there to produce it. Too long ago, not long ago, but some time in the past, we had the research and then we gave it away. We're not doing that now. We're producing it. And when I compare us with other nations, and I'm looking with, obviously with my accent and Angela's as well, to New Zealand. New Zealand has a very with it health service like ours. They have vaccinated 5% of their population. So they've had to shut the borders. We can't shut our borders. We must keep our borders open for trade, for business, etc. And now we hope for holidays. So it's down to us to get that vaccination working, and down to us to develop other vaccinations or change the vaccinations to cope with variants which will come, be it from India, Brazil, France, anywhere. They will come because that's the nature of a virus.
Okay, so you don't think we could? I mean, you're both New Zealanders, and we know what's happened in New Zealand as you've just summarised. And you don't think that we could have closed our borders in the same way, or even restricted movement earlier than we did?
New Zealand is in the middle of a huge ocean. It's a tiny island. It's self-sufficient for food, it's self-sufficient for power. The numbers of people that fly in and out every month when it was open are less than fly in daily into Heathrow. We are a business centre in the world. We import an awful lot of our food and export a lot of our food. It is absolutely vital that we keep those borders as open as is possible.
But it's the people
with-
coming in, not the food,
Safeguard.
that causes the spread of the disease, isn't it? And how is
Yeah, but hang
what
on,
reasons?
the food-
If I could just
food-
finish this question, what reasons have there been for people coming from India over the last few months, or month really?
Many of those people actually have British passports.
Yes, but
and
why
we've
are they
got to
travelling?
recognise
We haven't been travelling.
because they want to come home.
There are exceptions, Martin. You know,
But they have to go
they're
through
not-
quarantine, don't they?
they absolutely do.
So how's it come here then?
I'm
It
afraid.
only needs one person to do it. New Zealand, with its shut borders, still got through its shut borders the odd person going in, and they got the virus into Auckland, and they had to shut Auckland down. There's been other outbreaks in the area as well, even though they've got their closed borders. When we have borders like ours, where we have to keep them open, we're slightly more vulnerable, but we're overcoming it. We're overcoming it by the vaccination program, and we're overcoming it by our lockdown program.
And can I just add, on the economic side of things, in terms of keeping things open, let's look at the journey that the New Zealand economy is going to undergo because they shut their borders down. Currently, the Labour-run government has put a pay freeze on public sector workers. So, you know.
Okay. We're running out of time, Angela.